Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
I'm Uncle Dan.
And I'm Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
Yup. Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
That's right. But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear. That's why we're here.
We're your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields,
we're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Well, fellas.
Howdy.
Hello.
Here we are again, and everything's great. And
it's a beautiful, beautiful world.
It's a beautiful world. It's a beautiful time to be alive. The country is being blanketed by Saharan dust.
Yeah.
And plague.
And plague. We're all looking forward to what July brings.
Yes,
who knows?
What seal will be opened in July?
Exactly.
So stand by. Yeah. Have you guys seen the fucking locusts in Africa?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
That's one of them.
That's
what's happening.
That is a classic right
no,
there.
Yeah.
I haven't yet, just because I'm fighting my way through the dreadful news of the day that just, will not stop coming.
Yeah, it's terrible. The locusts are terrible. And then,
Great.
Anyway, but here we are. We're going to bring some sunshine to your day.
Oh, yeah. It's nothing but blue skies and roses from this podcast every week.
Well, for once, I'm the sunny spot.
That's true.
Once, I'm the happy. I wouldn't say it's ecstatic, but it's a happy story. And we're going to retrace my steps in the Vietnam War. Is what we're going to do, and you're going to love it. Yeah.
And I'm going to give the a hateful hagiography of a fairly new minted saint. And talk about how he has become relevant all of a sudden again.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to talk about a little tiny sect of Islam that is all of a sudden extremely relevant today.
Yeah,
it's the little Islamic sect that could.
Yeah, it's got a few twists and turns in this one. And before we jump into the show, let's just remind our friends out there that our friend and listener Joe Waldhair has started a Facebook group, an unofficial Facebook group. We're not officially attached to it.
That's right. If it blows up, it's not our fault.
We're lazy fucks, and we don't have time for that sort of thing. But it sounds like it's a great community over there, already kind of growing. So everybody who wants, go jump in and play nice if you can. Don't give Joe too much to do.
Mm-hmm. And if you can't play nice, then fucking leave him alone. Jesus Christ. Nobody needs more trouble in the world.
He's a nice Canadian man. So don't be rude. Be decent. And
that's right.
We still got the merch. You can go to the Heretic tab at thehowtoheretic.com. We're expanding rapidly on YouTube. I think within a couple months we'll have half our segments up there. So it's all happening, guys.
It's all happening.
Yeah, it's all happening.
Lest we bore you with all of the minutia surrounding the podcast, shall we indeed do some content?
Let us launch.
Let us forget the business and do the show.
Uncle Dan.
Hey!
A little peek behind the curtain here.
Okay.
For our listeners. Typically, we tease out a little bit of what's to come in the segment between, and then we toss to the uncle who's doing the segment.
It's a little sizzle. We make a little sizzle.
Yeah, a little sizzle. And I got to say, I got nothing.
Yeah, Uncle Mark told us what he was going to be doing. He used words, and we recognized nothing and stared blank-faced into the void.
Well, so just another day that ends in a Y then.
So take it away, Uncle Mark, before my cat does.
So, okay. Weird. Well, fellas, we've covered a lot of religions and or cults on this here show, and I think that's a pretty interchangeable term anyway, but that's not the point of today's thing. And so many of the ones we've covered were either very obviously or at least arguably created for bad or nefarious purposes.
What?
Most of which boil down to the leader or founder wanting power over credulous dupes and unlimited access to their money and daughters. It's usually daughters. Yeah. With the fewest number of birthdays under their belts as possible. If they can get all three of those things, they either end up in a mass suicide a few years later, or they get themselves a fancy choir and a big organ and go into the real estate development business, or maybe a couple thousand years later, end up with a teeny tiny country made of golden statues and guarded by Swiss guys who look like nutcrackers, and no one can really understand how the fuck any of that managed to happen. Anyway, on rare occasion, a religious group, at least outwardly, gets going because the founder or founders believe they can do some actual good in the world. And claim
that's the worst kind.
Yeah, that's it. They don't last. And they claim to have had some sort of inspiration to foster peace, love, and understanding in a world rocked by war, greed, violence, and the pernicious presence of raisins in too many fucking things. Raisins have nothing to do with today's segment. I just fucking hate them, and this is my show, so deal with it.
Okay.
That is not the opinion of all of the members of this program.
Counterpoint, exactly.
For Doug, it's spiders. For me, it's fucking raisins. So, anyway, religious people...
Are there people putting spiders in cereal that I don't know about?
Maybe.
They should now.
Yeah. Religious people can and do make earnest attempts to make the world a better place. Some have turned out fairly well. Others, as we explore on this show every week, turn out far less well. You guys know about Esperanto?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a fine idea. It was a constructed language birthed into the world by L.L. Zamenhof in 1887.
You made that name up.
No, he did.
He was the great-grandfather of LL Cool J.
He was. He was the LL Cool J of late 19th century Poland. And also an ophthalmologist of all things. Zamenhof wanted to create a universal second language for all the people of the world to foster peace and understanding, and it almost entirely did not become a thing.
Right.
That is, except for 1966's art house horror movie starring pre-Star Trek William Shatner, Succubus. Yes, a whole movie shot in Esperanto because the director thought it would be a spooky creative choice. How about that?
Oh, my God.
I'll include. I just read the craziest article about that movie. I'll include it in the show notes. It's very worth a read. Anyway.
I had no idea about that, but I will say this. I have a friend who is taking the... what's the app? The app that teaches you languages?
Like Rosetta Stone? Or
No, it's one of the... Anyway,
yeah.
He's studying Esperanto now. And I was like, why the fuck are you doing that? And apparently there is a worldwide network of Esperanto people, speakers, who will let you couch surf wherever anywhere in the world.
Really?
If you speak Esperanto.
Oh, it's like a little secret society.
Yeah.
I love it. That's very cool.
Oh,
might be worth learning a few words. So anyway, total diversion. Today's religion is maybe a little like Esperanto, yet it has nothing to do with it. Possibly an earnest attempt to gift the world a philosophy to make things better. How rare is that, you guys? How great a price could we value such a pearl at? So, let us travel to the verdant, gorgeous, distant shores of that long, skinny motherfucker of a country, Vietnam. Have you guys been to Vietnam?
I have been to Thailand. I have not been to Vietnam.
I thought you went to Vietnam. I'm dying to go. It's definitely at the top of my list of places.
I wanted to, but I had bone spurs, so...
I tried to go 5 times, but just couldn't make it happen. So.
Just couldn't. Yeah, they wouldn't let me.
No, I would definitely love to go. I know we have some listeners there, so maybe we need a How to Heretic Hanoi hangout meetup one of these days.
Boom,
say, guys. Yeah,
make it happen. Are you kidding me? We are in the United States of America. We're not going to be allowed to go anywhere in the world for a decade.
Feels good to be a pariah.
We're the COVID-19.
Yeah, that's
land.
our major export.
So, yeah, exactly.
So in this gorgeous country, to which we very much owe several apologies, the 3 biggest religions are, can you guess, guys?
I'm going to say Christianity's one of them.
I'll take it. Catholicism, second largest.
Okay, so it's got to be, is it Buddhism?
Buddhism is by far and away the largest.
Okay.
And the third largest, I know you're about to say, is, say it with me, Coa Dai. Exactly right. This is true. What in the world is Coa Dai? You may be asking. Well, it's our little Esperanto of a religious idea. Think of it as a coexist sticker brought to life by some eager Buddhists having a seance. I could stop there, but why would I? So, for the third largest religion in a country with nearly 100 million people. Did you know they had 100 million people?
I did not know that.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
Asians know how to pack them in. I'll say that.
Sure do. They're kill at Tetris. I had no idea it was that big a population, but there you go. So it must be quite ancient, right? Nope. The first person to receive a transmission from Coa Dai of his new world religion was a minor official in the French administration of Vietnam, a guy named Ngo Van Chu, who heard the call in 1921. Coa Dai, which means high place or high tower, was then air quotes revealed to a group of Ngo Van Chu's followers, some Vietnamese mediums and spiritualists on Christmas Eve, 1925.
Oh.
Vietnamese listeners, you can tell me how badly I'm about to butcher these names when you see me at the Hanoi meetup. But the good news was given to Pam Kong Tak, Cao Quinn Kerr, and Cao Hoi Sang, who saw the divine eye of Coa Dai, Almighty God, which has become the symbol, or more accurately, one of the symbols of this madly over-symbolized young faith. Now, why were these formerly Buddhist folks having a seance? The obvious answer might be that ancestor worship is extremely common practice in Buddhist Vietnam, and that might be a possible answer, but it actually turns out that Vietnam, or this group of people there, was not immune from the fever of spiritualism that was sweeping much of the Western world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
It was so hot back then.
It was the hottest thing. And it was led by figures we've discussed, such as Helena Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, and, of course, even Rasputin, Russia's greatest love machine. So the original visionaries of Coa Dai, or Coa Daism, as its practice is called, were very much part of that mostly Western movement. And as we've talked about, seances, table tipping, Ouija boards, spirit mediums, and all sorts of hooey like that were part of that spiritual sideshow.
Man, we white folks export all the wrong things.
Yeah,
can I just say?
A lot of stupid shit, for sure. The Coa Daists continued using seances, equipped with a coconut drinking ladle with a pen in the end as their vision of the Ouija board's planchette until 1975. So, you know, Have you ever watched a movie set in Asia where when someone drinks out of a well, they have like a long stick ladle thing?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's like that. That's what that is. So somehow a pen in the end of that would tell you what God wanted you to do. So
it's exactly what you want.
What did the eye in the sky tell these mystics of the Mekong? Well, the Almighty God Coa Dai told them to found his new church, officially called Dai Dao Tam Ki Fo Do, or the Great Way of the Third Redemption. This time we are in now is the last great age before total destruction. So right. Coa Dai wished to unite the great religions of the earth. So it incorporates the giants of the Asian world, Confucianism, Taoism, and Chinese Buddhism, but also absorbed large portions of Christianity, mostly the Catholic variety, Islam, and Hinduism. So for once, dearest Jews, you seem to have been left out of something. I'd count that as a win.
Yeah, it never goes right for them when they're included.
Yeah, they're never asked. They're just simply included, which is just, it's got to suck. So they believe all religions are derived from the same God and truth through various messengers and are all equally true and divine, or were, of course, until Almighty Coa Dai established his last true and final church. So this is where it starts to get interesting. So Confucius, Buddha, and Jesus are all major prophets of the religion. And it has
walk into a
lesser
bar.
saints. Yeah, and nobody speaks the same language. But Esperanto saves the day because it's all their second language. And maybe some of them will be surprising, some of these lesser saints, to some of the listeners. So there's 16th century government official and poet Win Bin Kiem, naturally, and perhaps most obviously Sun Yat-sen, who led the revolution to overthrow the Manchu Qing dynasty and became the first president of the Republic of China in 1912. Okay.
Interesting.
Because, of course. And I can hear Uncle Dan straining to scream out the name of the next saint because it's almost too obvious. And that name is, of course, that of the French poet and novelist, author of Hunchback of Notre Dame, Victor Hugo.
Yeah, obviously.
Yes.
I was going to say Teddy Roosevelt, but same diff.
Maybe. Well, Vladimir Lenin, hardly a figure that anyone, most especially himself, would describe as a messenger from God, is included in another layer of saints. So
Great.
Yeah, I'm surprised we're not in there as well at this point. So
we're working on it.
Like most of the traditions they sampled and repackaged for re-release, they believe in a heaven and hell, and that there is a Mrs. Almighty God Coa Dai, her name being Divine Mother, And the genders of their almost equal co-godliness are expressed in the yin and yang symbol found in the pupil of their divine eye symbol, which is a left eye, by the way, because that is associated with the right brain, seat of creativity, abstract thought, and religious experience.
Good Lord.
Remember when I said this was a symbol-heavy religion?
Yeah.
Let's chat about just one of the very, very many, the divine eye. At the main temple, there are over 50 divine eye symbols that fall into 5 different categories. The center of the main altar is a huge ball with an eye painted on it, and it's kind of a stellar globe thingy. And the eye is painted just above the North Star in the Ursa Minor constellation. The outer facade, on the outer facade, is an eye with 35 rays of sunlight radiating, representing all, what they call the 3 major religions and 5 main doctrines of the world. Other eyes have 16 rays, 9 going upward for the 9 levels of heaven, which will get confusing in just a minute, and 7 rays going down, representing the 7 human emotions, which are mostly to be controlled or suppressed. Some eyes are in triangles, some in clouds. Basically, you feel like you're being watched the whole time you're there. This building is like one of those nightmarish praising beasts from the Book of Revelation. Just all eyeballs.
I love it.
As far as symbols go, Coa Dai looks to me as if the Masonic order was invented by Asian Buddhists rather than occulty European Protestants, because it's got like keys and suns and moons. It's madness. So it may be, but probably not a nod to the Mormons. There are multiple heavens, and they are on planets, you guys.
Hey,
36.
I think the Mormons are in there. Do we got a Heavenly Mother?
I know. There's a lot of cross-pollination here, isn't there? The Mormons have an eye. Isn't there an eye symbol?
I think they stole some stuff from the Masons, but I mean, it's not. I can't think of there being kind of like an all-seeing eye type thing in Mormonism.
No, that's where I've seen. Anyway,
but
there's 36 planets, and the multiple hells are not on planets, but 10 different planes customized to the sin of the deceased, very much like the Buddhist vision of hell called Naraka we discussed in episode 7, or the celebrated hell in Dante's Inferno with its multiple descending circles. And we, my fellow Earthlings, are the lucky 68th of the 72 planets, a grouping somehow distinct from the 3,000 worlds and 4 great cosmic regions, which can be clearly explained by, no fucking idea. And
this all sounds like somebody got into the like there's just administrative nightmares happening all over the place, and they just had to include everything.
Yeah, this sounds like one too many Mekong whiskeys, and somebody came up with an idea. And while Coa Daiism looks and feels very much like a sort of Buddhism, its structure is closest to that of the Catholicism the French were kind enough to bring with their bayonets. They have a pope, who is called the Pope, who lives in a complex in Tainan called the Holy See. They also have cardinals, bishops, priests, and nuns. So by the 1950s, this brand new religion had attracted 1 in 8 South Vietnamese people.
Wow.
Which is growth the Mormons dream of, but have only ever seen in their secret stock portfolios. So they began to accrue some real influence and presence in the country. They formed what was at first a small security force that grew essentially into a private army that sided with both the occupying Japanese and then after them the French. And then their 2,500-strong brigade of men was absorbed into the South Vietnamese army and fought against the North in the Vietnam War, which they, of course, rightly called the American War. So after the fall of Saigon and the end of the war and the communist takeover of the South, the Coa Daiists were rightly expecting some major retribution, and there was quite a bit. All their churches were seized by the government. 4 leading Coa Dai priests were executed in 1979, and loads more were broken and tortured in prisons. Several parts of their worship was banned, including the seances that were their method of speaking directly with God, Coa Dai. And while the properties have been returned and the jailing and the killing has stopped, for some reason they're still not legally allowed to practice the seance anymore.
Huh. That's because they're kind of spooky.
You never know who's going to be on the other side.
It's scary.
It's usually Houdini, but it could be Victor Hugo.
Could be any number of things. You never know.
You want to unleash Victor Hugo into the modern age again? I don't think so. So, and other than their army and support for occupying powers, they seem kind of cool. They're vegetarians, mostly pacifists. Obviously, they're soldiers killed in the employ of their government. But other than that, I couldn't find a body count of any kind, which is normally the act 3 of our stories on religions.
Right.
Were they pressed into service during the war?
Yeah, they fought against the North. They I don't know if they were pressed. It seems like they were willingly fought against the communists in the Vietnam War, which is why there was retribution when the communists took over.
Gotcha.
Right? And their main temple, with all the radiating eyeballs in Tainan, is pretty cool if you look it up. It's columns wrapped in pink dragons and shit, eyeballs everywhere. So there they are, friends, the Coa Dai. It's not one religion, it's all of them. It's the kitchen sink of faiths with a little something for everybody, even, or perhaps most especially, those who enjoy the works of Victor Hugo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I'm just desperate for the day when this podcast finally checks off the last subject off our list. So I don't appreciate it, Mark, when you add subjects that are not even on our list. Just prolonging this misery.
Yeah, that's the whole point of this podcast, is just get to the end of the list.
Get to the end.
Yeah, it's just a task, a chores chart, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
what's funny is, I'm not obviously any kind of a scholar, but Jesus, I thought I knew some about the history of Vietnam vis-a-vis the war,
Yeah,
and I had no idea.
I'd never heard of these people, and there's some in the States, because obviously there was a huge amount of relocation to the States at the end of the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah.
You mean after we won the war?
After we won the war, Dan, and so there are apparently Coa Dai churches and practitioners here in America.
Cool. I'm going to convert.
Yeah, you could do way worse. So
Yeah, sounds like
Sounds
it.
great.
enjoy,
Awesome.
guys.
All right. Well, thanks for that. And maybe we should just move along.
Doug, you know that I am a fan of legendary New Orleans jazz.
I do know that.
Yeah, and in fact, we've been to one of New Orleans jazz legends.
Oh.
What was the name of the fucking place? It just slipped my mind. That's how much I love it. The Preservation Hall.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful night there.
there's no greater classic New Orleans jazz song than "When the Saints Go Marching In." Yeah,
They named a whole football team after it.
They sure did. With
And
a big,
Val Kilmer's best movie by far.
"When the Saints Go Marching In."
That's right.
Yeah, a football team with a big dum-dum of a quarterback that is now in trouble because he's a racist. So anyway, that's all I have to say about Saints. What, Dan, you have anything to say?
Well, we have been known to talk about Saints from time to time on this little
And
program.
whether
of
they
ours.
march in or out, we're
Or
ambivalent.
and who knows what what they're carrying as they march. And it seems like when we do talk about Saints here, there are basically two categories. There are the sort of more ancient saint stories, which are so garbled and overblown that it becomes instantly clear that either their stories are wildly exaggerated, or they are a combination of a few different people, or they never actually existed at all, which is almost always the case.
Right.
It's super easy to dismiss a story that's so outlandish that it ends with a guy parading around carrying his own disembodied head.
Yes.
That's not a miracle. That's a Wes Craven rejected. That's a concept Wes Craven rejected for being, quote, too campy.
Yeah, and he rejected no premises.
I was about to say, he rejected an idea?
Yeah, exactly. So then there are the more recent saints, the ones that we have much better documentation for, who we know existed, and we have their writings, and we have firsthand accounts of who they were and how they acted. We know to some extent what their lives and works looked like. So today's saint falls into that category. So let me take you back in time to 1794, when a 36-year-old Spanish Franciscan friar first landed in the Americas. Padre Junipero Serra was let's call him a devout man. And his brand of devotion was, what's the word? Potent? Extreme? Insane? Yeah, that's close enough. Let's go with insane. And to illustrate what I mean, let's just talk about when he first came to our humble hemisphere. Father Serra landed with a group of other friars at Veracruz, Mexico. Together, they made the arduous 250-mile trek on the Camino Real, which, Doug, I'm going to go to you for translations here on a lot of these things. Camino Real, what does it mean?
The Royal Road.
The Royal Road, or the Royal Trail, to Mexico City. This was a tough journey, not only because it cut through dense tropical forests, but also because it climbs 7,400 feet in altitude in the process. The friars were given horses, but our boy Junipero declined because Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the Franciscan order, had once said some damn fool thing about friars not riding horses unless they were totally infirm or something. Such was Serra's devotion that he walked. And that turned out to be a pretty shitty idea because jungles, it turns out, are full of creepy crawlies, and something bit his foot. By the end of the day, he could barely stand and had a fiery itch that was driving him bonkers. And he scratched so much that by the next morning, his leg was a bloody mess. Ugh. Well, not to worry, open wounds do really well in damp tropical climates, right?
But with the medicine of the time, I'm sure just a little bleeding and you'd be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the idea that he's so devout. He's like, "Dear Lord, I will prove my devotion by what? God damn it! Ow!
What is that? A mosquito? No,
I got the poison ivy.
Yikes! Anyway, it did shockingly become infected, and homeboy had a fucked up leg for literally the rest of his life. Now, I had considered telling that story along with some joke about him limping around like Paul Bettany's character Silas, the albino monk in the Da Vinci Code. Only instead of a silice, Serra had a mosquito bite. But here's the thing. This motherfucker actually was like Silas. He was 100% into self-mortification. He wore a silice.
Really?
Maybe not the spiked metal garter around the leg, but he would wear a sackcloth hair shirt spiked with bristles, or a coat that had broken wire woven into it. He used to whip himself with a chain of spiked iron links.
Oh my God!
In one story, he was giving a sermon in Mexico City, and he brought out that chain, pulled down his robe to reveal his naked back, and started whipping himself in front of the parishioners.
This is a man well suited for mosquito bites, is what you're saying.
Exactly. I'm saying he was fine with it.
Yeah.
And boy, talk about an object lesson. That will have an effect. Folks were apparently weeping in the pews, and then one guy, after he had been doing it for a minute, got up, grabbed the whip from the padre's hand, and proclaimed that it was he and not Serra who was sinful, and he started whipping himself.
Oh, boy.
And our father Junipero watched proudly as this man mortified his own flesh. Literally mortified, from the Latin meaning put to death, because he was so effective in his self-flagellation that he collapsed and died.
Jesus.
Now, I can't be sure of what Serra's emotional response to that event was, but given what I've read about the guy, I'm going to guess envious? I mean, that dude showed some devotion.
Yeah, I can see myself in that space and time slowly backing out the front of the church.
Right?
Okay.
So I was just dropping off a package. I am going to go back out and get another one.
Do you know where the non-crazy Catholic church is? Because that's the one I meant to go to.
All the way back? Nope, there aren't any.
Nope, it didn't work. Okay. He had other fun hijinks as well when it came to sermonizing. He was known to hold a crucifix in one hand and a large stone in the other, and then whack that stone against his chest.
Oh,
that was a cute one. Or there was the other one where he would take a 4-pronged candle and lower his chest onto the flames. RuPaul
always says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? And I just think that he should have listened to that.
I think his love for other people will manifest in ways that you might find predictable. We'll see. He wasn't the only friar to use this kind of self-punishment in his sermons. In those times, it was reasonably common among the insanely zealous subset of monks, but even then, the other priests were like, dude, dial it back several notches. They were probably just jealous that he was so awesome at hurting himself, really. Put it this way about Serra and the reputation he garnered for himself. In 1752, he wrote to the officials of the Spanish Inquisition to ask for an inquisitor to come and check out all the nasty witchcraft and dark sorcery that he was sure was going on there in the Sierra Gorda. When he wrote in, they just gave him the job. They immediately appointed him inquisitor for the whole region right there on the spot, adding that he could also exercise those powers anywhere he did missionary work. Imagine how hardcore nasty you gotta be for the fucking Spanish Inquisition to just toss you a badge and gun and say, "Get out there, kid. You're ready."
Yeah, he's an inquisitor that plays by his own rules.
Yeah. So that's our guy. Wow. Little snapshot into who he was, but that's not why he was canonized. No, you don't get to be a saint just because you have an unimpeachable auto-violent lunatic credentials. For that, you gotta go big. So, in 1767, due to a bizarre series of circumstances that I don't have time to get into, nor do I actually understand in any way, King Carlos III of Spain got a bee in his bonnet about Jesuit priests. He basically kicked all of them out of all Spanish territories, or imprisoned them, or killed them.
Wow.
That left a lot of religious spaces with no weird virgins with freaky haircuts in charge. So, the Franciscans stepped in. Our boy Junipero was appointed president of the missions of Baja California. Now, I don't know if you fellas know what you fellas know about the missions of California and Mexico. I mostly knew that they were Spanish and that people love the architecture. But apparently they had a purpose. And that purpose was well illustrated by the story of the first mission Serra himself founded. The Misión San Fernando Rey de España de Velicata. I nailed all of that.
That was brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
What was the last word?
Velicata, which is a town.
I was going to say, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So when Serra, S-E-R-R-A, say it, Doug.
Well, it would be Serra.
Serra, right.
Yeah.
When Serra and his small band of merry misfits got to Velicata, all he had was a mud hut to do his priesting in, which he did. But here's the thing. He wasn't there to priest at a bunch of already Catholics. His sights were set on bigger game. A few days after Serra's party arrived, he was positively thrilled when a dozen or so indigenous men and boys approached the makeshift church. Here's what he wrote about them. Quote, "Then I saw what I could hardly believe to begin when I read about it, namely, that they go about entirely naked like Adam in paradise before the fall. We treated with them for a long time, and although they saw all of us clothed, they nevertheless showed not the least trace of shame in their manner of nudity. Idiot natives.
Yeah.
They don't even know that they were supposed to feel bad for being naked. What morons. Anyway, that was great as far as Serra was concerned, because this was the whole reason he was there. He was in the Americas to save savage souls. Gleefully, Father Serra greeted them. He gave them figs, and the soldiers that accompanied him gave them tobacco and food. Serra knew that he wouldn't be there long. He was on a journey up the coast, but through an interpreter, he assured his new naked friends that his buddy, another friar, would be staying there and would gladly give them more treats. As Serra's colleague and biographer said, quote, I don't know if this is a quote. He said something along the lines of, spiritual conquest meant enticing Indians with food and clothing, by which means they could be indoctrinated as Christians and gradually acquire a knowledge of what is spiritually good and evil. So that was the name of the game.
Wave off, Native Americans.
At least they were giving him food.
Right?
That's a step up from plenty of missionary work.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is all going to end well.
Yeah. What could go wrong? So yes, that's what they do. They lure in the indigenous folk and teach them about how disgusting and awful they were. To save their gross little souls.
Yeah. Because Jesus loves them.
Right, exactly. Well, you might be surprised to learn that some of the natives didn't really take to this. Weird, right? Even when you give them figs. But that was the whole point of the missions, and Serra was not one for half measures. So buckle up, Indians. Shit's about to get real. He made his way north into what we now call California, which is Spanish for what, Uncle Doug?
California.
That's right. It's a nonsense word that a novelist made up about a fictitious place, probably based on the Arabic word Khalifa. Anyway, that was a tidbit that I had to look up because I suddenly was curious, and apparently it's nothing.
I believe it's pronounced California.
California.
Yeah. The G. It's like Gal.
California.
No.
It's got it's all in the back of the throat.
Yeah. Get to the fryer.
Get to the mission. Anyway, the rest of Serra's career and the work that got him his sainthood occurred in modern-day Cali, so let's jump ahead to a little later as the work of the missions really started to take off. Basically, from this point onward, all of his energy was devoted to cleansing the savages of their sins to get them into heaven.
Oh, boy.
I mean, it's nice that he wanted heaven for them, I suppose, but given what we know of his views on how to cleanse himself of sin, this was never going to go well. Father Serra believed with all his fucked up little heart that every heathen death was a desperate tragedy. And why wouldn't he? These poor people were going to hell for eternity, which is totally fucked up. So his sole purpose in life became to convert as many as he possibly could to the obvious truth of Catholicism and save them from their sin, so that they could go to heaven. From his perspective, it sounds like a beautiful idea, and he committed to it, like, all the way. So, what do you do? What do you get when you cross missionary zeal with Opus Dei levels of crazy and Spanish Inquisition-style persistence? Well, let's just say that all those cute little Spanish churches that dot California's coast, the ones that hundreds of thousands of school children and tourists visit every year, would be far more complete if they had iron gates with the saying, El trabajo te libera on them. Doug?
Work will set you free.
Yeah.
Or in German, Arbeit macht frei. Because those adorable Adobe missions were indigenous slave concentration camps.
Jesus.
Oh, boy.
Thousands of American Indians were brought in with the promise of food and education. The Spanish had tools and knowledge that definitely would be useful for the native populations, so there was a real enticement there. But the, quote, education they received didn't include things like, reading and writing. It was entirely about how awful they were and how to Catholic so that they would be less terrible. The only practical training that they got ended up being how to work fields and tend livestock for no compensation. Because here's the thing, once an Indian converted and entered the mission, he wasn't allowed to leave. Oh, and his family too. So our little padre, Mr. Serra, and his ilk felt that the converted needed to be sequestered from the unconverted masses, to keep them from relapsing into their nasty heathen ways. So the best course of action was obviously imprisonment. And the conditions
if you
were...
converted, you went to prison?
You went to... it wasn't prison, it was the mission. Oh, you got to live at the mission forever.
Yeah.
And ever.
It's like the Hotel California, Doug. If you don't want to stay, don't check in. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Is that what the
you
song
can
is
check
based
out
on?
anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Yeah. That will be our first and last Eagles reference ever on the
And they're done. That's right. Yeah. I hate the fucking Eagles, man. And the conditions in those missions were
amazing.
I'm going to call them Christian. In the most horrific and historically accurate meaning of that word. Indian men were whipped and beaten in front of the others when they got out of line in any way. The whole group was kept in a perpetual state of terror. So, that's going to save their souls, right?
Yeah.
Women were whipped too, of course, but they were often taken away so that their screams wouldn't incite the men to violence. Kids over 10 were also considered old enough for a good whipping. Now, our Saint Junipero believed that the natives were basically children, and somehow believed that beating them kept them infantilized, which kept them from sin. So the missions would have up to a few thousand Indians held captive there, in each of them. Often, while the men were sent out to work, the women would be packed by the hundreds into large rooms called conventos, with just a couple of buckets thrown in as toilets.
And just kept in there?
Just kept in there.
Yeah.
So these kinds of conditions...
concentration camp, yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of conditions, combined with the Spanish hobby of introducing new pathogens into indigenous populations, led to horrific illnesses and mass deaths. Here's a fun little quote from a letter Serra wrote to his superior from one of the missions. In the midst of all our little troubles, the spiritual side of the missions is developing most happily. In San Antonio, that's the mission San Antonio, there are simultaneously 2 harvests, one at one time, one for wheat and of a plague among the children who are dying.
Oh.
Cute, right? They're
That's
harvesting
nice.
the children to heaven. Isn't that darling?
Oh, that's so fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, local political leaders actually tried to convince the Franciscans to end their horrific practices and embrace so-called Enlightenment policies in their missionary work. But by that time, the economies of the missions were kind of directly linked to having an unpaid labor force. So,
This is awkward.
maybe not. Maybe we'll just keep things as they are.
Yeah.
Of course, history is written by the victors, or in this case, by the people able to write, and the legend grew of a man who valiantly converted thousands of natives to the joyous teachings of Jesus Christ. Also, as is so often the frustrating case with shit like this, several tribes actually stuck to their captors' beliefs and have largely maintained their Catholicism to this day.
Wow.
So, the story that stuck for centuries was of this heroic missionary who founded many of California's most important cities, and thus it came to pass that Junipero Serra was beatified by Pope John Paul II in 1988, and then canonized by Pope Francis in 2015.
Are you kidding?
No way.
Both of these popes, as is so often the case, completely ignored the objections raised by historians and native people and decided to just go with the lovely whitewashed story to which there is only one side, so everybody else just shut up. Statues of Saint Junipero
I was about to fucking ask that question.
This is where I know him from, yeah.
are scattered all over California, from San Francisco's Golden Gate Park to Placita Olvera in downtown L.A. Or rather, they were,
Yes.
because Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis haven't been the only assholes whose images are coming down in this era of finally facing our racist past.
Bye, Felicia.
Right? Emboldened by the movement that finally boiled over after George Floyd's murder, folks have been toppling old Father Sarah as well.
Good.
So, once it came... Now, there's a fun little fact, which is that once a saint is canonized, there doesn't seem to be a mechanism to unsaint them, which means that the Catholics are stuck with this guy basically forever. So that's fun. But at least we, as a society, can stop venerating this monster and all the other ones like him. So I just wanted to bring it up because I applaud the bringing down of this disgusting fella, who's also holding a cross in these statues that are almost always on public land also, which is problematic.
I think I saw the film of the one coming down in Golden Gate Park.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was pretty awesome. And I think, there's also this movement among a lot of people to think of Pope Francis as this kind of sweet grandfatherly good guy.
Right.
Well, he's relative to other popes, maybe, but
Right.
that's a pretty fucking low bar. And if he canonized this guy and having known full well the history, fuck that guy.
Well,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do you have to canonize this guy? Like, what was there a fucking lobby? Was there pressure? Like, you know what I mean?
Well,
like, can we just not
he has
canonize
been
dicks?
He's been portrayed as a hero ever since his life. Like according to Catholic lore, he was like the guy who converted so many people. They just kind of ignored the part where those people were treated in the most horrific ways possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy.
Fuck that guy. There you go. Saint talk.
Saint Junipero. Enjoy, everyone.
Gentlemen,
Hi.
Hello.
I here's the thing. I feel good about the world. Not so much, the hatefulness, and we have some problems still in this world. There's there's still cops killing black and brown folks, and
Yeah.
civil unrest, and all sort, and a president who is tweeting racists doing their fun stuff. But
He's quite a pill. I'm just going to say it.
you think?
Yeah. He's a real pill.
All right,
He's
if you
ornery.
say so.
He's ornery.
However, among all of these bad things, there are beautiful things in the world, and I think probably the best thing in the world is people who choose to give our show their money.
I don't even know if it's a choice, Stan. I think it's a compulsion. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something that comes from the marrow. It's like you don't want it. You must have it. You must do it. And I think those are the best people for sure in the world.
They are the best people, and so we have a bunch of them to thank. So I'll just dive right into that. So thank you for parting with your money, Robert, EW, Soho, or Sojo, maybe. C. Yeah, exactly. Frank, man. Wait. I have to click that one because it's like got a name that I can't read full. Oh, Man by Technicality. And Uncle Mark,
Speaking.
you must grant a saint unto Zach. And let's make it a better saint than what I've just presented.
Zach. Well, let me... Is that Zach with a CH or a CK? Because that's important.
It's a CH. It's an important distinction.
Yes, it is indeed. And that changes everything. I stare like, let me face northwest. Look into the eye of the weasel. Aha! Yes, of course. The Zach's saint would be Saint Elderberry, the Nifty of West Osaka, and that, of course, as everyone knows, is the patron saint of Wisconsin Public Radio, the William Tell Overture, and anyone who experienced big financial ruin by going all in on Betamax technology.
Boom.
Yeah.
Boom.
Finally, I have a patron saint.
Yeah.
Right?
So there were a lot of people who were not covered until Saint Elderberry was, of course, canonized by Pope Edmund the 43rd.
Right.
On Tuesday last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is a great saint. And I will say that to this day, there are people who will yell, Betamax was better. It should have won.
Well, and that's why there's a saint involved, because
Right.
the saints come from a lot of lost causes, and it was better. But
I wonder what the Venn diagram of people who believe Betamax was better and people who believe we should go back to the gold standard looks like. You know what it looks like? It looks like a laser disc.
it looks like a floppy disk. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Zach, and everyone else who pitched in. You can do it yourself. It's so easy. You just go to howtoheretic.com. You'll see a little thingy that says support us. You click on that, and then you one of those bill counters you see in all the casino movies. You just put one of those on your keyboard with all your money in it and press go. and then we'll be rich. And then if you can't do that, or in addition to doing that, you really should do both. Go anywhere you can give us 5 stars. Give us 5. It looks like 4 is an option. It's actually not. And,
it's not.
And if you put 4, you get automatically audited by the IRS. So, I mean, you can do it.
If you put 3 or below, it actually ruins your computer.
Yeah. So it's up to you. I would probably, the safest bet is probably 5, even if we haven't.
It's really the only safe bet.
Yeah.
Definitely give us 5 stars and know that you have our undying appreciation.
It cannot be killed. Literally, it's immortal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks to all of you. Let's do the rest of the show. Hey, Uncle Mark.
Hello.
Listen, when you're cleaning your apartment, what is your favorite multi-purpose cleaner to use?
Well, I mean, I got a lot of clubs in that bag, Dan.
I figure you do.
Yeah.
You're not like, too uptight, but you're a fastidious fella.
I'm a fastidious fella. I run a tight ship over here.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Have you tried Alawite? It is. It keeps the whites white, and the I have no idea what that word means. I just learned about it.
Well, let's see if Doug can give us a ShamWow presentation on this exciting new product.
Well, let me put down 2 markers here. One, I want everyone to recognize that Uncle Mark used a golf metaphor.
Yeah,
which is well outside of his religion.
Quite by accident.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I am fully aware of doing a segment that looks suspiciously like all a white in this particular moment in time. But here we go.
Yes. Let's dive right the fuck in.
Let's do this.
What could possibly be more appropriate than
Yeah.
the 3 of us doing a segment called All White?
It has been the long-standing opinion of this podcast that religion has the tendency to cause harm.
What?
I know. Going on a limb. And when that harmful influence is married to government power, very bad things happen. We are witnessing this in our own country as we speak, as evangelical Christians constantly attempt to cram their religious beliefs down our throats, to overextend that metaphor. And indeed, even though our Constitution expressly forbids this, our current federal government is a regular rogues gallery of religious fanatics, from Vice President Mike Pence to AG Bill Barr on down. These are indeed dark times.
Don't forget Pompeo.
I won't. How can I forget Pompeo?
Betsy DeVos. We could keep going.
Yep. We can keep going for the rest of the segment. And these are dark times, but as Rust Cole said in the final scene of True Detective, while looking up at the night sky, it's just one story, the oldest, light versus dark, and once there was only dark, if you ask me, the light's winning. A strangely hopeful moment in that show. So
very, very, very out of it's an odd way to end that show.
Yeah. So while we struggle to keep church and state separate in our country, let's take a look at a place where those two things are inextricably linked. And spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. Today, let's talk about the Alawites. So pronunciation disclaimer: I'm going to say a bunch of Arabic words wrong, so sue me. I'll do my best.
I mean, you're on Arabic. My Spanish is atrocious. We got Mark over there trying to do some Vietnamese. It's fine. We can't even pronounce English.
That's right.
I think everybody knows.
Right. So the Alawites, or Ansariya, or Nusariya, depending on where you are in history and or which invading army you belong to, are a sect of Shia Islam, although it's a stretch to call them a sect because they are pretty different. They are often referred to as a mystical branch of Islam. So as a quick reminder, after the death of Muhammad in 632, there was a succession crisis in Islam. The Shia claimed that Muhammad designated his cousin and son-in-law, Ali ibn Abi Talib, nailed it, as his successor.
Are you doing the Bill Cosby dentist shtick right now?
I am not doing a Bill Cosby shtick right now. I want to put that on the record. So he designated
Ibble dabble dooble, you see?
You know what? If you want to be safe, do your Mel Gibson. That's just
there you go.
It's a safer.
It's a center square in bingo.
That's right. Yeah. So Muhammad set his son-in-law Ali as successor, while the Sunnis claimed that Muhammad left no successor and Abu Bakr was appointed caliph. This made Shi'ism a hereditary religion and therefore a much smaller branch of Islam than Sunniism. Ironically, the Alawite religion was born of another succession crisis. After the death of the 11th Imam in 873, the Alawites, or Ansariya, became the dominant religion. They were often referred to as a mystical branch of Islam. So Ibn Nasiriyah claimed to be the 12th Imam and broke from Shia Islam in and around the Aleppo region, which today comprises northern Syria and southern Turkey. Now, in order to prevent a succession crisis from happening on the How to Heretic, I would like to officially designate Bronson Pinchot, who played Balky in Perfect Strangers, as my successor as leader of this podcast should I fall in battle.
Sure.
Crisis
Yeah.
averted.
I was hoping for that.
Frankly, I think we can get him.
But he has to be in character as
Balky.
Bartakowitz. Bartakowitz? Was he Jewish?
Bartakamus.
Yeah.
Back to the story. The Alawi quickly diverted pretty significantly from Shia Islam and borrowed heavily from the other religions in the region, including Gnostic, Neoplatonic, and Christian traditions. So they allow themselves to drink wine in moderation, but usually only by men. It seems that one of the only things all these traditions had in common was disdain for women.
Sure.
They celebrate a form of mass, and they also celebrate Christmas. They venerate. It's interesting. They venerate Christ and Mary Magdalene, various saints, as well as obviously Muhammad, Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle as well. They do believe in reincarnation, but very much like the Buddhists, your next form depends on the works of your life today. But unlike the Buddha, what's
That's
that?
nowhere else in Islam, right?
Nowhere else in Islam,
Yeah.
as far as I know. Don't at me.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think that reincarnation is part of their.
I mean, you can add us. You can teach us something about Islam. That's okay.
Don't want to learn. But unlike Buddhism, this reincarnation cycle does not go on forever. You kind of get through it, within a few lifetimes. The Quran is not their only holy book. They also have a book called the Khatib al-Majmu, which is a collection of teachings that make up the doctrine of Alawi.
Definitely nailed that name.
I'm sure I did. They do not publish this book and claim that the only extant copies are passed from teacher to apprentice. You hear that, Mormons? Just because you have it doesn't mean you have to pass it around. It was
Just
stolen
like with COVID-19.
Exactly. The Khatib was stolen and published by the French during their occupation of the region because everyone in history was an asshole. More on the French occupation in a minute. The Alawites consider Christians and Muslims to be heretics, and the feeling is more than mutual. Unsurprisingly, the Alawites have been persecuted throughout history by every invading army to come through. Not long after their founding, the European Crusaders invaded in 1097, and after initially killing many Alawites, became convinced that they were not Muslims and left them alone, because the Crusaders are basically all John Cleese in the wedding scene from Holy Grail. The Alawites were not so lucky with the Sunni Ottoman Empire, which persecuted them brutally, pausing only to massacre them. During this repression, the Alawites became skilled guerrilla fighters and maintained their autonomy in the mountains of that region. After World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the League of Nations mandated the region to the French, who carved up the region into small ethno-states, including a small coastal Alawite state, marking the first time the Alawites were in control of their own fate. This lasted until the end of World War II and the fall of the French Empire, at which time the several ethno-states unified into modern-day Syria. So the Alawites were kind of aware that
everything worked out great.
Everything's been fine since.
Yeah.
In joining Syria, the Alawites knew they were going to be giving up their state was very, very small. The Alawite state was very small. And they knew that they didn't really have a future by not banding together, but they knew by banding together they were going to lose some power. So as the militaries of these states integrated, the Alawites maintained a secret network that eventually took power in 1970 in a 1970 coup led by Air Force General Hafez al-Assad. Yeah, the fact that an Alawite had seized power in a majority Sunni country was unthinkable.
Right.
It would be like a Jew becoming Tsar of Russia or a dim-witted racist failed casino owner becoming president of the United States. It just doesn't happen.
It's absurd.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. The Alawites are considered across Islam as heretics, and they only make up 12 to 14% of the country, so their ascension to power was surprising.
How many people are we talking about? Like millions or?
There's 2.5 million Alawites, mostly in Syria and Turkey, and then some smaller communities around the Middle East.
That's more than I would have thought. Okay.
So, and there's the ones in southern Turkey are separatist, but they as are all ethnicities in Turkey basically.
Right.
Now the coup that put Assad in power was only the most recent in a series of coups, and Assad knew that it was only a matter of time before someone came gunning for him. So he set about making Syria basically coup-proof. And the way he did this was pretty
Can you
savvy.
say that word again? I really
Coup-proof?
enjoyed that.
Coup-proof.
Sorry, keep going.
I know I'm murdering every language I,
think
come
that's
in
what a
contact
French
with.
magician says, isn't it? Coup-proof.
Okay, so what he did was pretty intelligent. He began to reorient the government to a more secular model, focused on Arab identity, which the Alawites shared with their Sunni brothers, and less on religious identity.
Right.
And while religious freedoms were marginally increased, tolerance for dissent was absolutely smashed. And I know I said at the beginning of the story that this was a story about the marriage of church and state, but in order to make that happen, Assad had to make it look like it was not happening. He gave the Sunnis power over various political institutions, which in a dictatorship are only the illusion of power, while the Alawites took control of the military, intelligence, and security apparatuses. Obviously, the only real power in a dictatorship.
I was going to say, what use are those? Those don't do anything.
So one of the things he did, and this is crazy, in every platoon or any unit in the military, there had to be an Alawite. And if the leader of that platoon wanted to do anything, he needed the permission of that Alawite.
Even if the Alawite was of a lower rank?
Even if the Alawite was a buck private and the leader of that platoon was a colonel or a general,
No.
he needed the Alawite's permission to do anything.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's so the majority Sunnis felt like they had power because of their political influence, which they did not have, and no commander could so much as move a tank without the Alawites knowing about it.
Jeez.
So this truly made Syria impervious to coups.
Huh.
And there were no coups or even partially successful coups after 1970. And between 1960 and 70 there had been like 8. It was pretty coup-y.
Yeah.
It's the cooeyest.
Well, that was pre-coup proofing. Yeah.
However, being impervious to coups does not mean that you are impervious to revolution. Hafiz al-Assad died in 2000, leaving power to his chinless dickbag of a son, Bashar.
Yeah, he's a looker.
Yeah. Bashar is considered, and let me see if I can get this pronunciation right, al-asshole. And brutally carried out his father's dictatorship until the Arab Spring in 2011. Protests started in March of that year, which Assad violently put down, and then this immediately blew up into an insane and bloody civil war that is raging as we speak. There are so many factions at play in this mess that it's nearly impossible to wrap your head around it. Let's give it a try.
Yeah.
Yay!
The Russian and Iranian-backed Assad regime command the Syrian armed forces, which is fighting a loose affiliation of mostly Sunni opposition groups, including the Free Syrian Army, allied by various Salafi jihadist groups, including the Al-Nusra Front, and mixed Kurdish Arab groups such as the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. It's not only a mess, it's one of the bloodiest conflicts of this century, and it is far from over.
Yeah.
So by the time it's over, I'm willing to bet it'll hold the title.
Okay, Doug, just be honest. How many of those did you make up?
Yeah.
$100 to the person who finds out.
Nope, nobody knows.
Enter into this bloodbath the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, more commonly known as ISIS. We will have to do a segment on ISIS all by itself one day, but not today.
Yeah.
Basically, think of them as the anthill kids with machine guns.
Right.
In a conflict stuffed full of bad guys, ISIS is the worst. Truly one of the evilest groups of people to have ever walked the earth.
Spoiler alert. Jeez.
And as in any story with a bad guy, there is a good guy in this one, namely the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, I mentioned before, made up primarily of Kurdish soldiers. With our support, the SDF was directly facing off against ISIS and kicking their asses. Therefore, no mention of the Syrian civil war would be complete without mentioning Donald Trump's decision to suddenly abandon the Kurds earlier this year.
Right.
Can you believe that was only earlier this year?
No, you
Yeah.
said that, and I was like, that doesn't check out.
It seems
I
like
was
10,000 years
literally
ago.
just trying. I was trying to do math in my head and couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's a betrayal that will come to haunt this country, assuming that there is a country left to haunt after this motherfucker leaves office.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't. The Kurds merit their own segment sometime, but American soldiers have been fighting shoulder to shoulder with Kurds since 2002, and in 2020 we just turned and walked away from them and left them to the slaughter. It's very bad. So, the end of this civil war will not be a happy one. If the Alawites manage to keep power, they will no doubt exact revenge on the Sunni and Kurdish peoples. If the Alawites lose, it's hard to imagine them not suffering the same fate. So, it's a long and winding tale of the Alawite religion from its religion to its role in the Syrian civil war today. So let me just end by asking this question. What part of the story would not be improved with less religion?
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a fascinating one. Like, I didn't realize, I knew it was an outsider in Islam, but I didn't realize that they drank wine, celebrated Christmas, had different holy books. Like, that's all pretty crazy.
Yeah, they're pretty far away
and
from...
reincarnation.
What's that?
And reincarnation. That is really surprising. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Like I said, they're referred to pretty derisively as the mystic form of Islam.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Sort
if you
of
know
the
Islam...
Kabbalah of Islam?
What's that?
The Kabbalah of Islam?
Something like that, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you know, anyone who knows anything about Islam, they're not psyched about heretics. So there you go.
But
Cool.
anyone who knows anything about this podcast knows that we are psyched about heretics, so
That's
that's
right.
awesome.
One of the
wanna
few
see
things
more
we
of
don't have in common with Islam.
Right. Everything else kind of lines up straight down the line, but
Yeah, we
that
check a
one-
lot of boxes. Yeah. So cool. Well, thanks for sharing the good news about the Syrian civil war, Doug.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Well, friends, that's it for this week's show.
Hey, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to teach us how to pronounce anything at howtoheretic.com.
Or if you are Victor Hugo, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. Victor, you can also at me on Twitter at HowToHeretic.
And thanks to our awesome and lovely patrons.
And thanks to Cody Layton, who is one of our major saints, for editing the show.
And thanks to all of you, dear friends, for tuning in.
Bye, friends.
All of yous. God damn it.